War of Unification has now raged on for a year, and there was no sign of stopping. But the Tyrant was in a more murderous mood. He would set out to make an example out of the other winglets. It was a simple request. Join him, or die by his command. Hi, I'm your host Heatwave, and let us continue our historical exploration, that is the War of Unification. As now, death itself has been made manifest.
Please, we mean you no harm. We're peaceful.
Yeah. Beg for mercy, Mudwing.
I'm not a Mudwing.
Whatever. Just eat shit and die, freak. A year. A year since that fateful day when ice slew sky, and plunged the two winglets into an onslaught of conflict that already has claimed so much for very little gain. The arrival of the Tyrant's Legion in support of the Skywings brought some reprisal to the war effort. Their better experience and training proved invaluable to those few early victories over the Ice Wings, even if their commanders were ambitious. Yet Pareena's very own landscape would prove itself superior to any military or strategy. The avalanche attack right before winter took a lot out of the Tyrant's Legion. After the withdrawal to safer peaks, a head count could finally be conducted. Almost 1/3 of all Tyrant's Legion forces on Claw Mountain were dead or missing from their ranks. The situation took its toll on morale, and with supply lines stretched thin and the onset of winter, a choice was made to stop the advance and dig in for the cold. Inductii engineers created whatever fortifications they could, using wood dragged up the mountain ranges. The 4th Tyrant's Legion, the Reserve Legion of the Royal Sandwing Army, released a large amount of their reserve troops to fill the gaps. But because of this, recruiting ramped up to meet the demand of the legions, and thus forceful recruitment began among the settlements of the Mojave. More troops were needed to execute this war effectively. Legamite Viper spent the winter coming up with a new strategy to tackle Claw Mountain. It was unknown the new strength of the Ice Wings. They may have recovered while winter washed over them. Yet, whatever Skywing scouts that were sent up the mountain ranges to take a gander at the Ice Wings never returned. This lack of information didn't help Viper at all. The Tyrant was already becoming displeased at his top general. He wanted this war over and done with by now. And the Skywings began to complain of manpower shortages, or at least of capable and trained fighting troops. They had already lost so much in this war. It was incredible how they could still muster up some worthless nobodies for their army. Yet the Sandwings bided their time until winter passed over. The new grand strategy for the Tyrant's Legion was to continue with their original blockades, but on top of that, construct large slingshots or catapults on the slopes to throw boulders and other large rocks against the peaks. It was understood that if large rocks hit the peaks of Claw Mountain, it could create vibrations within the mountain itself. Now, looking past whether or not this could actually be done, Viper was hoping that this would unleash some new psychological warfare upon the Icewings. By creating mass vibrations inside the catacombs of the mountain, it may cause collapsing in some of the weaker tunnels, and the constant rattling may drive the Icewings insane. It was an ambitious plan, and one that would take more time to show any true effects. Time Viper didn't exactly have in the eyes of the Tyrant. Queen Foxbat was appalled to see how many Skywings had already died after a single year of fighting. Sure, her goal was met, and she was told to be grateful for it by Viper. Yet so many Skywings had died under Sandwing negligence. The Queen had to be the voice of her winglet, stand up for her own kin. And with that, Viper told her to take her opinion about the war and shove it up somewhere more useful. The Skywing Queen was becoming a real annoyance to Viper. He preferred to deal with her advisors. They were far more agreeable to his ideas, and thus the Skywing Queen would be kept in the dark about the things the Sandwings were conducting. But then, a letter arrived for Viper. It was from Cinnamon. The communication informed Viper that the 3rd Tyrant's Legion had intercepted a number of Icewings leaving Claw Mountain and heading to the base of the mountain. Now, a few loose Icewings fleeing Claw Mountain was hardly noteworthy, but after some Sandwing persuading, and by persuading I mean breaking a few bones, the Icewings gave up their mission. They were sent by their patriarch to recruit the help of the other winglets of Pareena. Now this was particularly interesting to Viper. He knew enough about the other winglets of Pareena to determine they were not an issue. The Sea Wings had an effective fighting force of Royal Guard, sure, but they couldn't outnumber a single Tyrant's Legion. They were too small. The Rock Wings? They didn't have an army. They didn't even have a kingdom. They wouldn't be much trouble. Now the Mudwings and Rainwings do have the numbers to pull off a military offensive, yet they wouldn't risk their own scales for the Icewings. Fair to say, they would be coming to the rescue. Yet, before he could brush it off, being a loyal officer to the Tyrant, Viper sent his letter back to the Tyrant, who, after reading the report, was very eager to exploit this new opening. Frankly, to the Tyrant of the Mojave, simply beating his enemies with a big stick isn't working the way he wants. If taking on one winglet was taking this long, then his grand campaign of conquest will take a lifetime to accomplish. And frankly, who in Pareena has time for that? So, what if the Tyrant used other winglets to battle all the other winglets? Get his enemies to fight each other. Simply put, if the Tyrant could use other winglets to fight each other, they will deplete their own armies or kill each other off. Whoever lived would be in an exposed position, ripe for the Tyrant's Legion to swoop in and take action with little loss on their behalf. Following the Icewing's example, the Tyrant instructed Nevada to create some convincing arguments that would allow the other winglets of Pareena, not already engaged in the war, to finally do so. Now, Nevada was kept in the dark about a lot of the war, mostly because the Tyrant knew he didn't agree with it. Nevada didn't know that his brother died on Claw Mountain at the talons of Icewings, or at least that's what officially happened. Nor did Nevada know that the Sandwings swapped sides. But the mere fact that the Tyrant was asking for help meant only that the war was not going in his favor. Maybe this would be a perfect opportunity for Nevada to enact his own plans. Nevada, of course, was far smarter than his father gave credit to. He had a lot of foresight and was not beyond making friends in other places of Pareena. Nevada would pay some of his more loyal Sandwing merchants to travel Pareena and gather information on his behalf. All the while, the Tyrant was too busy with his game of conquest to notice. But what really interested Nevada was the Sea Wings. His informants described the Sea Wings as being a scattered holdout, yet one of the royal family, their princess that is, was willing to fight. And with the execution of those Sea Wings inside the Mojave, this princess is bound to join forces with Nevada. And thus, he began to draw up in secret his own plans for war and conquest. That to overthrow his father. The letters were sent out across Pareena by members of the Tyrant's Legion, and it didn't go as intended for the Mojave ruler, of course. The Rockwings refused to help outright. Under their elder, an aging Rockwing named Riverstone, argued that her small winglet couldn't possibly assist in any conflict or war. Plus, they were a peaceful community. They didn't want to earn the resentment of others. They just wished to be left alone. In the Tail Islands, no luck was found either, but the inductii who visited the inhabited islands in the Tail found that the more distant Seawing communities had more questions than answers. Like, what's a Tyrant? What's a Mojave? Or what is a Sandwing in some instances? Because of the Coral City being, well, under the sea, the Sandwing dignitaries couldn't actually get directly to the Seawing Queen. Yet she found out soon enough about the war, and was preparing to do nothing about it. It didn't affect her, or her kingdom. Yet her royal family didn't share the same idea. Eventually the war would reach their doorstep, and if nothing was done, their future too was looking quite bleak. The dignitaries sent to the Wet Spring Rainforest were pretty much immediately thrown back out by the Rainwing Mudwing Collective as soon as they mentioned the little fact that the Skywings, who were slavers, and the Sandwings, who also enjoyed slavery and were generally arrogant SOBs, were trying to kill all the Icewings and now needed more dragons to do this. Melon, the elder of both United Winglets, didn't at all accept this. His kin were not the puppets or throwaways the Sandwings were looking for. In fact, Melon even threatened retribution on the Tyrant of the Mojave if he dare try anything. All the efforts of these recruitment drives to gain more support didn't seem to bear any fruit for the Tyrant. Now all the Winglets knew of his goals, and of course they had a problem with it. Well, looks like a new plan will have to be created to compensate this. But winter finally broke, and spring began to settle in. The Tyrant's Legion had time to rearm, rest, and organize their ranks, and they began their new spring offensive, starting to push up the peaks, meeting, at first, limited resistance. But then, another letter came to Viper, signed by his lord and master. Under the Tyrant's orders, the Tyrant's Legion on Claw Mountain and their esteemed allies were to halt and dig in. The Tyrant had a new stroke of genius, and recalled the 3rd Tyrant's Legion back to the Mojave for further orders. Viper felt a bit bitter. It seemed like the Tyrant didn't think he was capable of conducting the war. Yet he still obeyed, sending word to Cinnamon to return to Shady Sands. The Tyrant's new strategy was one that was as bold as it was barbaric. The other winglets of Pareena know of his goals, or at least his hunger for power and his lack of remorse. Well, if these winglets won't willingly bow to him, or hear his advice to conquer the lesser groups of Pareena, then he will show them an example of his wrath, an example of his rule over life and death, his will to dictate the life of other dragons. He will make an example out of one of these winglets. While in Shady Sands, Cinnamon confided in Nevada. It had been months since they had seen each other, and Nevada was actually impressed by her new abilities to read and write after continuous practice while away. Cinnamon told Nevada what was happening on Claw Mountain, and Nevada was actually appalled to hear that his father lied to him and the massive loss of the Skywings. This invigorated Nevada to disclose his plan to Cinnamon. Think of it. A new kingdom, a new empire built by dragons for dragons. No more borders or royal families, a single unified Pareena. And with his insider knowledge of the other winglets' situations, Nevada instructed Cinnamon that now was the time to turn on her nightmare and take the fight to the Tyrant. The Seawings seemed most willing to fight, so Cinnamon was told to link up with any Seawings she can. This was actually a blessing in disguise, because Cinnamon just received orders to head down to the lower valley with the entirety of the 3rd Tyrant's Legion. But that's when her orders ended. Still, this would allow Cinnamon the opportunity to slip away with those inductii who she knew would follow her. But the Tyrant never told Cinnamon or his son exactly what his next moves were. He knew they were close, so he kept that information well away from Nevada. He was banking on Cinnamon's agreeableness and willingness to follow any order she was given. She can get this done. No issues. And thus, the 3rd Tyrant's Legion set out, fully furnished and equipped to tackle the will of the Tyrant. Their orders took them over Pareena's spine, yet still fighting on the Claw Mountain was just a few minor actions between the Icewings and Sandwings. The 3rd Tyrant's Legion marched to a predetermined point on Pareena's map. Here, they set up their defensive positions and awaited for their new orders. Inside her command tent, Cinnamon met with her Legion champion, a Sandwing named Mirage, a skilled fighter in both talon and blade. A strictly loyal champion at that. While he had no command authority, he was given the special secret orders from the Tyrant. Under the Tyrant's command, the 3rd Tyrant's Legion was to prosecute a campaign against the Rockwings, with the ultimate goal of finding their leadership and dislodging the winglet as a credible threat. This would be achieved once the winglet had been eradicated. All were to be put to the sword, without remorse or mercy. Cinnamon was confused by these orders. She was being commanded to commit genocide? Even in her submissive state, Cinnamon questioned this act. She has no beef with the Rockwings. At least, the Icewings on Claw Mountain started this conflict. The Rockwings have done nothing. Nevada told her that the Rockwings refused to fight at all. This actually brought back deep memories of her time with the Tyrant. The mere fact that she was punished just because that she was a hybrid, that she was different, that she did nothing. It ticked her off. Nevada was right. Now is the time to act, for all winglets of Pareena. As Mirage explained, Cinnamon must follow the Tyrant's command, but in her displeasure and anger, it didn't take long for the Mudwing hybrid to overpower Mirage, slitting his throat with her tail barb. But to seal the final blow, she sat on top of him, using her incredible bulk to quickly, but most importantly, silently crush his chest, killing him instantly. There was no turning back now. Cinnamon gathered her 75 most loyal inductii loyal to her. They stole supplies, weapons, and as much equipment as they could carry, and in silence and secret, left the 3rd Tyrant's Legion to begin their march east to the coasts of Pareena, hopefully in search of some willing Seawings, as Nevada stated. But in the aftermath, this left a gap in the command structure of the 3rd Tyrant's Legion. The death of Mirage and the disappearance of Cinnamon was unexpected, nor explainable by the Centurns. They were undecided on what to do, but following the orders of the Tyrant was the most sensible thing to do, or they too will have a very short military career. Yet some relished the chance to fight. Finally, nothing would hold them back. They could finally see some action. The Rockwings are the smallest winglet in Pareena. Their entire winglet fits neatly into a small little community. While not much exists regarding their history or culture, we do know there was a significant amount of dragons to be considered a real threat. In terms of cultural heritage, they seemed peaceful, and have a knack for collecting rocks and stones. They lived in large stone domes. How the domes and huts are created is still a mystery, same with many aspects of their winglet. They do seem closer to mudwings in a way, valuing things like family, but their lack of action and warrior creed, like so many other winglets of Pareena, would lead to disastrous results. In the dead of night, the campfires and torches the Rockwing village created was a flame so bright it was hard for the encroaching inductii to miss. At this time, guards were down. Dragons would be relaxed and sleepy in the evening. Their songs and chatter filled the air as the Sandwings creeped further into the village. The blackness of a spring night hid their snarling visage as they advanced into their camp, blades drawn. Before the first Rockwing slumped to the ground, its throat slit jaw to jaw. There was an uproar, a scream, and the small community plummeted into chaos. While a Rockwing is similar to a Mudwing, they aren't as bulky or strong, so one might imagine they would be an intimidating opponent. Yet, in the surprise, the Rockwings were helpless. The Inductii, though, executed their assault like the professionals they are, small sections fighting together as they advanced through the streets of the settlement, trampling baskets of produce and wrecking their lively little homes. The Rockwings, lucky enough to survive the initial strike, scattered, their black scales blending into the deep night. This, and only this small reprisal, allowed the Rockwings to mount a counterattack. After all, they were dragons. They had talons, tails, and fire at their beck and command. Many Rockwings gathered what they could. Eggs, dragonettes, and hatchlings were the most important, their safety paramount, that some adults threw themselves to the Inductii in defense of their children. Yet not even the innocent was safe. The Inductii had no issue spearing the dragonettes as they fled, snapping necks and crushing tiny eggs under their talons. They broke open homes and filled the domes with flame, burning them inside out. It was indescribable what happened that night. I can't imagine the pain of those Rockwings, to see their own hatchlings cry out in pure agony as the Sandwings butchered them senselessly. From the shadows, the Rockwings counterattacked, slamming themselves desperately into the Inductii. All effort to allow some of their kin an opportunity to escape at all cost. But it cost them their own lives. The Inductii encircled the entire village, creating a ring of snarling mauls and blood-soaked blades that glittered in the moonlight. There was no escape. There was no hope. The Sandwing soldiers cut down anything that moved, no care for age or innocence. Even the elder of the Rockwings was just murdered where she stood. No courtesy for her authority. She was just cut down like every other Rockwing. Bodies littered the ground. Blood soaked the soil. Their dome homes burned. there was nothing left but to give up and give in. The remaining Rockwings surrendered to the Sandwings, but not even that could save them. The males, elders, and dragonettes that gave up were all slaughtered where they stood. The females were captured, subdued, and hauled off as the third Tyrant's legions left. Their fate is ultimately unknown, but one could imagine it wouldn't be pleasant. It seems like in a matter of moments the entire winglet went silent. Their way of life, their culture, seemingly ended in one night. Their village still burned, the horror of the attack still on full display to passers-by for days. Those oh so few Rockwings that fled, scattered. But a few ended up in the wet spring rainforest. There, they first informed the Mudwings and Rainwings of the atrocities that happened. The Tyrant of the Mojave had clearly asserted his power. With his armies, he could crush any winglet, leave rubble and ruin in his wake, and have none the faintest of empathy towards the death of the young and the old. You'd expect the other winglets of Pareena to cower in fear. Yet that wouldn't be the case. This atrocity, well, will inspire a lot more than fear. It will ignite a desire for change. It will ignite a hunger for war. But that's a story for another episode.